My sister tried to evict me from the house until I revealed I had already bought it from our parents. I'll never forget the look on my sister's face when she walked into what she thought was her house with an eviction notice in her hand, ready to throw me out onto the street. She had this smirk, this confident stride, like she was about to deliver the final blow in a battle she thought she'd already won. Her husband, Greg, stood behind her with his arms crossed, looking smug and satisfied. They'd planned this moment for weeks, maybe months. They were going to reclaim the family home, kick me out, and finally have the life they thought they deserved. But what they didn't know, what nobody in my family knew except my parents and the lawyers, was that I had bought this house 6 months earlier. Every mortgage payment, every property tax bill, every repair, it all came out of my account. Because this wasn't their house anymore. It was mine. And watching Amanda's face shift from triumph to confusion to absolute shock when I pulled out the deed with my name on it, that was the moment everything changed. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want to know where you're rewatching from right now. Drop a comment below and tell me your country and city. Are you tuning in from Texas, Florida, maybe all the way from Australia or the UK? I love connecting with people from all over the world, so let me know you were here. Don't be shy, just drop a quick comment. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand how we got to that moment. I'm Ellie, and I am the youngest of 2 daughters. My sister Amanda is 4 years older than me, and growing up, that age gap felt like a canyon. Amanda was the golden child. She was popular in school, dated the right guys, got good grades without really trying, and had this natural charm that made everyone gravitate toward her. I was quieter, more bookish, the kind of kid who spent Friday nights reading instead of at parties. My parents loved us both, I know they did, but there was always this sense that Amanda was the star and I was the supporting character in the family story. Our parents, Carol and Richard, worked hard their entire lives. Dad was a contractor, Mom was a nurse. They bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood when Amanda was a baby, and they poured everything into making it a home. It wasn't a fancy, but it was ours. The backyard had a big oak tree where we used to play. The kitchen always smelled like Mom's cooking. It was the kind of house where memories lived in every corner. As my parents got older, they talked sometimes about what would happen to the house when they were gone. It was always assumed, at least by Amanda, that she would get it. She was the oldest. She had a family. She needed it more. That phrase got used a lot. Amanda needs it more. I went to college on scholarships and worked part-time jobs to cover what the scholarships didn't. I studied accounting, graduated with honors, and got a job at a mid-sized firm in the same city where I grew up. I lived in a small apartment, drove a used car, saved every penny I could. Amanda, meanwhile, married Greg right out of college. He worked in sales, made decent money, and they immediately jumped into the lifestyle they thought they should have. Big wedding, expensive honeymoon, a house they could barely afford in a trendy neighborhood. Within a few years, they had 2 kids, and the financial pressure started to mount. But instead of adjusting their spending, they just kept assuming something would bail them out. Usually that something was my parents' thing. I watched it happen over and over again. Amanda would call Mom crying about a bill they couldn't pay, and suddenly my parents were writing a check. Greg's car would break down, and Dad would cover the repairs. They needed help with the down payment on their second car. My parents helped. It wasn't that my parents didn't help me too. They did. But I rarely asked. I was independent, maybe to a fault. I figured my parents had worked hard enough and deserved to enjoy their retirement without constantly worrying about their adult children's finances. Amanda saw things differently. She saw my parents' resources as a safety net that would always be there. About 3 years ago, my dad's health started declining. He'd been a contractor his whole life, working with his hands, lifting heavy materials, and his body was paying the price. His back was a mess, his knees were shot, and he developed some heart issues that forced him into early retirement. Mom was still working part-time as a nurse, but Dad's medical bills started piling up. They had insurance, but it didn't cover everything. Copays, medications, physical therapy, it all added up. I started noticing that my parents looked stressed in a way I'd never seen before. They were worried about money for the first time in their lives. Amanda noticed too, but her response was different than mine. She started talking more frequently about the house and what would happen to it. She'd bring it up at family dinners, casual comments about how she and Greg could really use more space, how their neighborhood was getting too expensive, how nice it would be to move back into the family home someday. My parents would nod uncomfortably and change the subject, but Amanda kept pushing. She acted like it was a done deal, like the house was already hers, and it was just a matter of waiting for the right time. One night, I was having dinner with my parents, just the three of us. Amanda was supposed to come but canceled last minute. Something about the kids having soccer practice. Dad looked exhausted, more tired than I'd ever seen him. Mom was doing that thing she does when she gets worried, picking at her food without really eating. I asked if everything was okay. They exchanged a look, one of those married couple looks where they have an entire conversation without words. Then Dad said, "Ellie, we need to talk to you about something." My stomach dropped. I thought he was going to tell me his health was worse than they'd let on, that he was sicker than I knew. But instead, he told me they were thinking about selling the house. They couldn't afford to maintain it anymore. The property taxes had gone up, the roof needed replacing, the furnace was on its last legs. Between Dad's medical bills and the cost of upkeep, they were drowning. They were looking at smaller places, maybe a condo or an apartment, something more manageable. My heart broke watching them talk about leaving the home they'd built their entire lives in. I asked how much they needed. Dad waved me off, said it wasn't my problem, that they'd figure it out. But I pushed. I'd been saving for years, living below my means, investing carefully. I had money in the bank, more than they probably realized. I asked again, how much would it take to keep the house? They were quiet for a long time. Then Mom said, "Honey, we were thinking of asking $350,000. That would pay off the mortgage, cover the repairs, and give us enough to put down on something smaller." I didn't hesitate. I told them I'd buy it. They looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Buy it? How could I buy it? I explained that I'd been saving, that I had enough for a down payment, that I could get a mortgage for the rest. More than that, I wanted to buy it. I wanted them to stay in their home. We could work out an arrangement where they'd pay me rent, something manageable, something that wouldn't stress them out. They could stay as long as they wanted. It would still be their home, just legally mine. Mom started crying. Dad couldn't speak for a minute. They asked if I was sure, if this was really what I wanted. I told them I'd never been more sure of anything. The house meant everything to them, and they meant everything to me. If I could help them keep it, that is what I was going to do. We agreed to keep it quiet for a while. We'd handle the legal paperwork, transfer the deed, set up the mortgage, all of it, but we wouldn't tell Amanda right away. It wasn't that we were trying to hide it from her exactly. We just knew she'd have opinions, strong ones, and my parents didn't have the energy for that fight while we were trying to sort everything out. The sale went through about 6 months before that confrontation with Amanda. All the paperwork was signed, notarized, filed with the county. The house was mine. My parents stayed living there, paying me a small amount each month that covered part of my mortgage payment but was way less than what they'd been paying before. Dad's stress levels went down almost immediately. He stopped looking so worried all the time. Mom seemed lighter. They could breathe again. I thought eventually we'd tell Amanda, sit down as a family and explain what had happened and why. But before we got the chance, things took a turn. My mom had a stroke. It was sudden, unexpected, and devastating. She survived, but she needed extensive rehabilitation. Dad couldn't take care of her alone, not with his own health issues. We looked into care facilities, in-home nurses, all the options. The costs were astronomical. That cessed when I told my parents not to worry about rent anymore. Just focus on getting Mom better. They cried and thanked me over and over, but I didn't want thanks. I wanted my mom to recover. During this time, Amanda was around, but not as much as you'd expect. She'd visit Mom in rehab occasionally, usually with a story about how busy she was with the kids, how overwhelmed she was, how hard everything was for her. She never once asked Dad how he was managing financially or offered to help with any of the bills. It was like she assumed, as she always had, that someone else would handle it. Mom came home after 2 months, still weak but improving every day. I'd moved into the house by then to help Dad take care of her. I took a leave of absence from work, set up a home office in my old bedroom, and became Mom's primary caregiver along with Dad. We had visiting nurses coming a few times a week, physical therapists, the whole setup. It was exhausting, but necessary. Amanda would drop by maybe once a week, stay for an hour, and then leave. She never offered to stay overnight to give Dad a break. She never helped with the medical coordination or the insurance paperwork. She just showed up, played the role of concerned daughter, and left. One afternoon, about 4 months after Mom's stroke, Amanda asked to talk to me privately. We went out to the backyard, stood under that old oak tree, and she said, "Ellie, I've been thinking. When Mom and Dad are gone, Greg and I are going to move into this house. We need the space, and honestly, you're doing fine in your apartment. I wanted to give you a heads up so you were not surprised when the time comes." I just stared at her. When Mom and Dad are gone, they were both still alive, Mom was actively recovering, and she was already planning their funerals and dividing up their assets. I asked her if she was seriously talking about this right now. She shrugged and said, "I'm just being practical. We need to think about these things." I didn't tell her the truth then. I should have, but part of me wanted to see how far she'd take this fantasy. I said something non-committal and walked back inside. Over the next few months, Amanda's comments about the house became more frequent and more possessive. She'd walk through rooms talking about what furniture she'd keep, what she'd get rid of, how she'd redecorate. She started referring to it as my future house in front of our parents. Dad would look uncomfortable. Mom would change the subject. But Amanda just kept going, acting like it was all decided. Then Mom passed away. It was almost a year after her stroke. She'd made so much progress we thought she was going to make a full recovery, but she had another stroke in her sleep. Massive. She was gone before the ambulance even arrived. Our world shattered. Dad was devastated. I was destroyed. And Amanda? Amanda started planning the funeral like she was planning a wedding, taking over every decision, acting like she was the only one grieving. After the funeral, we all gathered at the house. Amanda pulled me aside and said, "We need to talk about the house. I know this isn't the best timing, but Greg and I are going to need to move in within the next few months. Our lease is up and we can't afford to renew. Dad can stay in the master bedroom, that's fine, but we'll need the other rooms for the kids." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was talking about moving into my house, the house I owned, without even asking. She just assumed it was hers. I told her we'd talk about it later. She seemed satisfied with that answer, but later never came from my perspective, because I had no intention of letting her move in. This was my house. I'd bought it, I'd been paying for it, and I'd been taking care of our parents in it. Amanda had done nothing but show up occasionally and make demands. A few weeks after the funeral, Dad sat me down. He was worried. Amanda had been calling him constantly, pressuring him about the house, asking when she could start moving her things in. He told her the house wasn't his to give anymore, that he didn't own it, but he didn't elaborate. He asked me what I wanted to do. I told him the truth. I wasn't letting Amanda move in. This was my home now, and while he was welcome to stay as long as he wanted, Amanda and her family were not moving in. Dad supported my decision, but he looked so tired. He said Amanda wasn't going to take this well. I told him I knew, but it didn't change the facts. The house was mine. I had the deed to prove it. A few days later, Amanda called me. Her voice was sharp, businesslike. She said she and Greg were planning to move in at the end of the month, and she needed to know when I'd be clearing out my stuff. I took a deep breath and told her she wasn't moving in. There was a long silence. Then she laughed, this brittle, fake laugh. "What are you talking about? Of course we were moving in. This is the family house. Mom and Dad wanted me to have it." I told her she needed to talk to Mom and Dad about the house ownership because things weren't what she thought. She got angry then, really angry. She said I was being selfish, that I'd always been jealous of her, that I was trying to steal her inheritance. I stayed calm and told her to check the property records if she didn't believe me. Then I hung up. 2 weeks later, she showed up with that eviction notice. She'd done some research, found out that technically I was living in the house, and assumed that meant she could evict me as the rightful heir. She didn't understand that you can't evict someone from their own property. She walked in that front door with Greg right behind her, holding that paper like it was a trump card. Dad was in the living room. He stood up when they walked in, looking frail and anxious. Amanda barely glanced at him. She looked right at me and said, "Ellie, I'm sorry it has come to this, but you've left me no choice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." I almost laughed. I looked at Dad, who nodded slightly, giving me permission to do what needed to be done. I walked to my room, grabbed the folder I'd been keeping in my desk drawer, and came back. I handed it to Amanda. "You should probably look at this before you try to evict me from my own house." She opened the folder, confused. Greg leaned over her shoulder. I watched as they read the deed, the mortgage documents, the sales agreement from 6 months ago. Watched as the color drained from Amanda's face. Watched as Greg's smug expression collapsed. "What is this?" Amanda whispered. I said it plainly. "That's the deed to this house. I bought it from Mom and Dad 6 months before Mom passed away. I own it. Every mortgage payment comes from my account. Every property tax bill has my name on it. You can't evict me from my own home, Amanda." She looked at Dad, eyes wide, betrayed. "You sold the house to her? Without telling me?" Dad's voice was steady, but sad. "We were drowning, Amanda. Medical bills, house repairs. We couldn't afford it anymore. Ellie offered to buy it so we could stay. She saved us." Amanda's face twisted. "So you just cut me out? Just decided I didn't matter?" I shook my head. "This wasn't about cutting you out. It was about helping Mom and Dad when they needed it. Where were you when they were struggling? Where were you when the bills were piling up?" She didn't have an answer. Greg looked furious. He said something about family loyalty, about how this was going to tear us apart. I told him it wasn't my responsibility to house his family just because he couldn't manage his finances. Amanda started crying, loud dramatic sobs. She said I'd stolen her future, that I'd always been jealous of her, that this was revenge for every time she'd been chosen over me. It was absurd. This had nothing to do with childhood rivalries. This was about me stepping up when she wouldn't tea. They left that day with nothing to say that could change the facts. The house was mine. Over the next few weeks, Amanda tried everything. She consulted lawyers who told her she had no case. She called other family members trying to turn them against me, but most of them knew the real story by then. She even tried calling me directly a few times, alternating between begging and threatening. I didn't engage. There was nothing left to say. Dad stayed in the house with me. We settled into a routine, taking care of the home together, keeping Mom's memory alive in every room. He told me more than once that I'd done the right thing, that Mom would be proud of me. That meant more than anything Amanda could say or do. About 6 months after that confrontation, I ran into Amanda at a grocery store. She looked tired, worn down. Her cart was full of generic brands and discount items. She saw me and hesitated, like she was deciding whether to run or confront me. Finally, she just said, "Hey." I said hey back. We stood there awkwardly. Then she said, "I'm sorry for how I acted. I really thought that house was going to be mine. We needed it." I told her I understood she was disappointed, but need and entitlement were different things. She nodded slowly and walked away. I don't know if she really understood, but it was the closest thing to closure we'd had. The truth is, I didn't buy that house to spite Amanda or to win some competition I didn't even know we were in. I bought it because my parents needed help and I was in a position to give it. I bought it because I loved them and couldn't stand watching them lose the home they'd built. Amanda spent her whole life assuming things would be handed to her, that being the oldest or having kids meant she deserved more. She never learned that you don't inherit things just because you want them. You earn them through showing up, through sacrifice, through actually being there when people need you. That house is mine now, and I've made it my home while honoring the memory of what it was. Dad still lives here with me. We've repaired the roof, updated the kitchen, planted new flowers in Mama's garden. It is not the same without her, but it is still full of love. And every month when I make that mortgage payment, I don't resent it. I'm grateful I could do it. Grateful I could give my parents peace in their final years together. That's worth more than any inheritance Amanda thought she deserved. So if you were watching this and you've ever been in a situation where family expected something from you that you didn't owe, where entitlement tried to overpower fairness, I want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing firm even when people call you selfish. Sometimes protecting what's yours means disappointing people who never appreciated what they had. Before you go, if this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. I share real stories about real family struggles, and I'd love to have you here for the next one. And drop a comment. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who felt entitled to something that wasn't theirs? Have you ever been the responsible one while everyone else just expected things to work out? Share your story below. I read every single comment, and sometimes just knowing someone else has been through it makes all the difference. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And remember, your value isn't measured by what you give away to keep the peace. It is measured by what you stand up for when it matters.